Serious, should an adult have the option to legally sign a medical suicide waiver in their life? My friend was arguing this point to me yesterday. He believes that a legal adult, 21 years old, should be able to sign a form and essentially be euthanized in a medical setting. What do you guys think about this? Would you accept this idea / make changes to make it more reasonable? I'm interested in hearing what y'all think.
Yes. If I'm also an organ donor, this makes even more sense if you think about it. Deleted. Yes, it should be my choice. Actually, it is my choice regardless, but should I choose to end it at some point, I would rather do it under the supervision of a medical professional to make sure things go smoothly. This is basically what Jack Kevorkian was fighting for. All his patients were terminally ill and chose assisted suicide. Presuming they are of sound mind when they make the decision, yes. Yes. And here in Switzerland, several organizations offer this service. Exit or Dignitas. Even available to aliens. Since in my country there is mandatory military/civil service for 6/9 months, I ended up working at a home for the elderly. Many of them want to go but can't. We force them to keep on going, and often it's the own family's selfishness that prolongs their miserable lives even more, by taking additional prolonging actions. Who are we to tell someone to live if they don't want to? There is nothing more personal than your own life, so a person should be entitled to let it end in whichever way they see fit as long as it doesn't harm others. Yes. I can't think of anything more important than the right to die. Absolutely. It's your life, you own it, and you should have the ability to make the decision whether you want to end it or not. I would only be okay with this if there was a large staff dedicated to counseling applicants. I think there should be at least a 1 to 2 week period of counseling to try and help the individual change their mind so they can't immediately go through with the procedure. If I were to try and put myself in the shoes of a medical worker, I would feel better knowing I was a part of something that really tried to help these people, and if they didn't change their mind, at least I was able to offer a 100% successful way to end their lives and without pain. There are serious issues at stake here. If we make this open, anyone who is depressed can simply sign a waiver and say they wish suicide. This is not a good reason or standard by which to hold suicide laws. It could be used for abuse, people could be bullied into declaring their need to end a life, etc. This is no good. On the alternative, if a person is terminally ill, I believe they have the right to decide that the course of treatment should be the most humane possible, which may include death. I think a blanket statement either way is no good. I agree with it, but I worry about the interference from insurance companies. Would they agree to honor life insurance for those left behind or deny it because it is suicide? Most insurance companies don't cover suicide. There would also need to be a check in place where insurance companies can't interfere with the decision. Say a young mother/father develops a terminal illness. They have life insurance for $150,000, and the treatment costs are $500,000 with a low success rate. I worry that an insurance company would pressure the ill person to take suicide over the treatment. Maybe even offer a higher life insurance amount so the family will be taken care of. Overall, I think it is a good idea, but easily corrupted. I wouldn't. Should other people? That's completely up to them, and we need to respect their decision. There are do not requisitate orders that you can tell your doctor about, but at what level would it be considered okay? I guess it would be a really long form. EA. If you're a vegetable. If you need machines to make you live. If you need to get a transplant. If you need a blood transfusion. The last one might seem heavy for some, but some people are really opposed to it. What is acceptable living for some isn't the same for others. My grandfather, Beeper, was a man that managed to dedicate every available minute and resource to his family, whose love for us seemed to radiate from him. He was a strong-willed and passionate man, never asking anyone for help or anything in return for his generosity. Last month Beeps put the barrel of a gun in his mouth and pulled the trigger. It shocked us to our core. Ripped my heart in two. When my father told me what was on his suicide note, I was finally able to understand why he did something so unimaginable. A recent test at the doctor's office revealed that his prostate was swollen to the size of a grapefruit. Doctors couldn't do much for him because they said that his heart wouldn't survive the surgery. He wasn't sleeping due to his excruciating pain. Instead of involving his family, who would no doubt do anything to help him, he ended it. Do I think that a man or women should have the right to end their life in a peaceful and humane way? Absolutely. Ask my father, aunts, and cousins who stood around Beep's hospital bed as he was struggling to breathe, bleeding to death. We buried him on what would be his 80th birthday, with his twin sister clinging to my arm, refusing to use a wheelchair to walk to his grave. This is the first time I've written about him since that day. I'd do anything to have him back. Everybody discusses the personal choice issue, which seems to provide an obvious answer, but legally, this is a very thorny issue. There is, and must be, a massive difference between suicide and assisted suicide because you are carving an exception to the definition of murder. If I inject you with deadly poison, that would make me a murderer. If you asked me to do it, under the current law, I would still be a murderer. So let's change the law. Okay, fine. But, what if I am lying and you didn't really consent? Do you take my word for it? We can't ask the dead person, so the evidence here is a real problem. Oh, I need a signed paper, you say? Notarized too? Okay. So now, suppose I'm telling the truth. The guy really did ask me to inject him. He consented. I was his friend and I tried to help. He couldn't afford a doctor. But, we didn't put it in writing. So now what? Do I get the electric chair anyway, for failure to fill out the proper paperwork? Or, how do I know the person is actually competent to give consent? Is depression a valid basis for suicide? Bipolar disorder? Or does any mental illness render the consent invalid? Does being suicidal without a physical illness mean you are mentally ill and thus incompetent to give consent? Does the doctor have to consult a mental health specialist to verify competency for the consent? Oh wait, only licensed doctors can legally kill people under your law? Are they really in that business? Does that violate their oath? How many will sign up for that? Will it meet demand? What if his license is expired? Does it become murder then? I can see why a legislature might not want to open Pandora's box here. Terry Pratchett made a documentary on this very thing for the BBC called Choosing to Die. He followed someone to Dignitas in Switzerland. This wasn't some botched scheme. The individual in question was seen by a doctor and a psychiatrist. If they were deemed to be competent and able to fully understand what they were doing, then they were allowed to go ahead. On the day they were due to be assisted with their suicide, they were once again asked. If they still wanted to go ahead, then they were given an initial liquid to help avoid vomiting with the final medicine. They were again asked and then given the final killer dose and reminded that they could still change their mind if they wanted. It was up to them when they took it, or if they took it at all. I have yet to see a valid reason as to why we should not be able to opt to end our life at a time of our own choosing if the quality of life that we can expect is dismal. The analogy of pets and their suffering is simplistic but accurate. We choose to end the lives of our cats and dogs when they can't walk or are incapable of making it outside to defecate, and yet when we reach a stage in life where we're bedbound through illness, we're expected to lose all dignity and shit ourselves to death. I have no desire to hear the opinions of religious people on this matter. They won't be obliged to seek assisted suicide, so I don't see why any discussion on it should involve them. If someone of sound mind is suffering a debilitating illness or has a poor quality of life due to a medical illness and it can be shown that they are mentally capable of making such a decision, then quite why we think it's acceptable to deny them the opportunity of a dignified death is a mystery. Yes, I think so, but not necessarily for the sole purpose of allowing people to end their life. I think it would be an important step in the direction of removing the stigma from suicide. If you make suicide something that there is a clear, obvious legal and medically sound stance toward, maybe it won't get swept under the rug. Maybe people who feel suicidal will feel like someone is looking out for their interests, even if that interest is killing themselves. The purpose of a suicide center should not simply be to assist people in ending their life, but to enable the debate with open arms. Their purpose should not solely be to end lives, but to end needless suicide. If we have experts that can help people get back on track, if such a thing is possible, that's much better than having them die. But if people have a terminal illness, or suffer from some other situation that cannot be realistically alleviated, it also makes sense to provide them the means to die in a peaceful, respectful and respected manner, in safe surroundings, rather than withering away because of a horrible disease, suffering every day until the end of their lives, in front of friends and family. Consenting adults should have no restrictions. It's your body, you should be able to do what you want with it. Maybe you don't like it, but you can't impose and police your morality on others. When my grandma was in the final stages of Alzheimer's, my family had a conference with hospice to talk about the realities of prolonging her life. I was so grateful the worker was brave enough to say, "Breathing is not living." With her consent, we opted to keep my grandmother off machines. Within a week she slipped away peacefully and with dignity at home. I would hope that my family would have the same respect for me. Of course. It's your body, you can do with it what you want. I've been living in chronic pain for 22 years secondary to an injury that resulted in 4 back surgeries. I've met a lot of people in such pain that they would beg the doctors to actively end their life. It's kind of ironic. There are many people who want to commit suicide but want someone else to help them. I think Dr. Kevorkian is a hero. When living is too painful to bear, death/suicide is the only humane option. If anyone has a choice, it's the person. It seems a bit ridiculous to me to think that a government has more of a right to my body and or life than I do. It's ludicrous. They tell us that suicide is the greatest piece of cowardice. That suicide is wrong, when it is quite obvious that there is nothing in the world to which every man has a more unassailable title than to his own life and person. Arthur Schopenhauer sums up my views pretty accurately. I'm from Oregon, one of the only states where this is legal. I have to say, I will never leave home because of this law. Ultimately, this debate can be likened to debates on women's reproductive rights. This is my body. I choose what I eat, drink, and smoke. I have the right to adorn my body through tattoo and piercing. Hell, I could even change my sex if my gender did not align. Why should the state not let me choose to end terminal suffering? Another argument concerns the financial aspect of hospital care. Without universal health care or assisted suicide, many families are left to deal with huge medical debts after, say, a family member with a terminal illness dies. I sincerely believe that the fact that many states refuse to enact law lies in the influence of the church. Fuck that. Let me die on my own terms when I'm ready, not when my biological processes give out. I agree with people choosing to end their life for medical reasons. I disagree with how you worded your question. I'm not for something as simple as a signed document being that arbiter. It's rare, but sometimes people have the wrong procedure performed. Suicide is not something I ever want to happen due to administrative mistake. Additionally, there are bad people out there that would manipulate this system. My grandfather falsified my grandmother's will. He's certainly the type of man who would have falsified a suicide waiver. I agree with the principle, but it has to be ironclad that it is what that person wants and an objective third party, doctor, agrees. Ink on paper doesn't cut it. Yes. Yes. A person's life is their own. No one has the right to tell them what to do with it.